was innocent until proven guilty. It is just looking a bit mad for Russell right now. It really is. So here we go. So here's the thing, right? And this is the one thing that I think possibly this whole case is based off, right? Is during this documentary, the first lady that is interviewed, one woman alleges that Brand arred her against a wall in his LA home. She was treated at an R-word crisis center on the same day. And here's some of the things and some of the key points, right? This was on July in 2012. She's one of the individuals who has his eyes glaze over. And that day she went to a local R-word treatment center the day of the attack, gave samples, gave her underwear, gave a detailed account, but never went to the police. Okay. I think Desolate One, I think he made a statement about how he is returning willingly, if that makes sense. I think that's what I'd heard. So then she never reported to the police due to fear of backlash and how she felt like her life would have been probed during the investigation. Now, that at least gives us a detailed report at the time and samples, like she said, right? Now, if she never went to the police, then this is just sat in an R-word crisis center for what? 13 years? And this could be, I mean, could you imagine, right? You've got all these allegations, you've got all these reports, you've got all these rumors. And for 13 years, lying in an R-word crisis center is this bombshell. And when the police said that they started their investigation after seeing this documentary, this is possibly the nail in the coffin. And there was text message to her where he basically admitted it. Okay. It's kind of nuts, right? So another interesting thing that was round about the same time of the first victim's story. Hang on a second. Let me take Katherine off the screen here. There we go. Russell. They were talking about, one of his producers was talking about how she had seen him be approached by members of the industry, the production team on the shows they were working on. And they'd all sort of said, "Oh, Russell, get the photos out," this kind of thing. And he's flicking through images of women that he'd either taken or had been sent to him. And, you know, the woman who was talking said she then seen someone that she knew and she realized that, you know, they were laughing and he's, you know, showing these intimate images. Now, that in itself paints the character of an individual that sees people as objects in my eyes, right? Don't get me wrong, very different, still weird, right? But very different if it's public images people have put out of themselves, whether it's actors, actresses, whatever, models, whatever, right? But when it's intimate, sassy images, you know what I'm saying? There's just such a weirdness to that. Now, he was declared in the newspapers as the shagger of the year 3 years in a row, right? So we have to sort of wonder, why were we holding this guy to a high pedestal, right? With regards to the shock factor to find out how he wasn't very nice to his past partners. Now we're not I'm not necessarily I'm not saying R wording anyone, right? But not being nice. That's the statements and the interactions that we've had. Now, this victim describes the fact that he kind of begged her to come over, and when she arrived, he sort of ran out of a bedroom completely naked and said that one of his friends was there. Or it paints this god complex narcissist, and it's kind of mad. Right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, it was the whole culture, Marie, right? Like we talk about he talks about it. We talk about the culture being different then and being different now. Um Also, guys, can you give me a like and a share? Help me push this out. The algorithm is a bit spicy right now. So any help that you guys can give me for my little shows, I would really appreciate it. Now, there was this weird culture that everyone spoke of. And if we are going along the lines that this was production wide, this mindset, this complete disregard for these women's feelings, emotions. And we heard from the ex of Russell's that we had on the show when he passed on an STI, STD, how he kind of made jokes about it. Later this week, we're going to look into times where Russell has publicly sort of embarrassed people and used platforms to do so. Because I'm beginning to see the possibility of a real darkness here. And, I didn't want to find that. I didn't want to be like, oh, there's another one. You know what I mean? So, first of all, what's interesting for me is when we talk about the whole R as a concept and not a concept, but an action that's done by someone. All right. She was carrying a bag from Topshop, and he was talking to her, asking her what she was doing. And now I do believe that there was another reason. She'd been working somewhere and he'd seen her there and then seen her out shopping. There wasn't just like, oh, young person dialed in, geez your bag. But he grabbed her bag, went through it and said, handed her a dress and said, this is what you should be wearing on our date tonight. Now, she said she agreed to go on a date with Russell. And she says, looking back, and this is honestly the most cringe, this is the first major cringe moment where you're just like, wow. Like, imagine having this thought process. Now, she said when she was doing her makeup and getting dressed, she said she didn't feel like a woman, right? Obviously. She said she felt like, a second. Yeah, she felt more like a child that was getting dressed up for dinner. She was 16. Now, I know what you're all thinking in your head, right? I know what you're all thinking. He didn't know how old she was. And this kind of went on long. And, oopsie doopsies, right? All consensual. Oh. So her story is where the narcissistic love bombing, the attention, the grooming all becomes very prevalent as an alleged tactic in this period of this man's life when it comes to women. Charisma as well. Yeah, absolutely. And can manipulate vulnerable women, of course. So here's the thing. We are talking, and this is where I need to be real with you, right? So these are two adults, okay, 16-year-old and a 30-year-old. Some people may argue that this is someone who's looking back through different eyes and regretting decisions. But then we read on, okay? Like, so I'm just catching everyone's thought process as it's happening here, okay? Because up until this point in the story, right? Just what I've explained, you could think to yourself, well, you know, maybe she's regretful now and looking back and whatever. So that's when she told Russell that she was a virgin. Okay. And I'm not going to use the exact quote, but she said Russell became notably, visibly excited. Okay. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Over the fact that this 16-year-old was a virgin. Now, he then goes on to say, and I'm quoting, "Oh, my baby, my baby." He then started to cradle her and referred to her as my little dolly. That is grim. That is grim, right? And this is where it gets mental, okay? Like, this is where her story just goes next level, because she goes on to allegedly to say that allegedly she goes on to say that allegedly Russell Brand would coach her on how to lie to her parents at 16. He would role play conversations as her dad and give her an adult's response to her excuses. He tried to drive a wedge between. That is proper dark, right? It is proper dark. It's there's a big difference, right? Actually, let me word this very carefully. There's a big difference between a situation where two people have been out, got off their nut, and can't remember exactly what happened. But that's still not RN, is it, really? When we start getting into the world of grooming, of manipulation, of narcissistic tendencies and traits, love bombing, conditioning, this is a well versed individual at this stage, right? This is day one of this, allegedly, in my humble opinion, because I mean, you, this is crazy, and if we end up with more individuals coming forward with text message interactions, with recorded this, recorded that, with whatever, and we start seeing this man, this apparent second coming savior, okay, is nothing but a well orchestrated predator groomer. I'm telling you, man, there is going to be some proper disappointed people on the internet. I'm telling you. Now, it doesn't end there. So she goes on to talk more about getting into this relationship. Time goes on a little bit, and she gets to talking about when he orally r'd her. Now, all of this sounds a lot like exactly what we read in his charge sheet. Okay? So this is also where we sort of start realizing, is he talking about this in his comedy? because this young lady Alice is sat up in Russell's bed. He walks straight into the bedroom, stands up in front of her in front of the bed, forces his manhood into her mouth, and harshly, okay, to the point where she has to physically wind him by punching him in the solar plexus to get him off. She's crying and she's screaming at him. She's completely distressed by what has just happened. And his response is, just wanted to see your mascara run anyway. Right? But then he cuts back to one of his comedy skits where he's talking about how, I'd never suggest it. Right? But, those BJs where, you kind of end up in the throat a little bit and their eyes start watering and their mascara runs. I'd never ask for it. Okay. But I'm just saying, you're right. You wouldn't ask for it. I think the joke, Russell, was meant to be that you wouldn't ask for it. You know what I'm saying? But if it happens, great. Not running into a bedroom and making it happen regardless, right? Because when we look at your track record of talking about STDs, sharing intimate images, getting some of the most complaints on a BBC show ever for your antics and the way that you would live call people or live or play conversations, it doesn't really showcase someone who has respect or control. It's quite a terrifying thought to think that you're possibly out there, and in the same way as you're rubbing people's faces in it because you gave them an STD, you're up there rubbing people's assaults in their faces, rubbing R word in people's faces. Because that lady stayed with you, okay? And then more incidents happened. I just want to apologize for what I'm about to talk. You keep cutting out, Ron. Is it just me? It's probably just you, mate. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of people would have probably kicked off if they couldn't hear me, if that makes sense. So Russell Brand makes a joke about, hey, whether it's the humble kiss or right the way up the sex plethora to what he considered the top echelon, which is, doing it in the back door, shall we say. He said all of it can be improved with spit, right? And he's like, hey, this isn't even a joke. This is just a good sex tip, right? And then this girl goes on to describe him lying on top of her, right? Lying on top of her, couldn't move her limbs while he held her mouth open and drooled into her mouth, then forced her to swallow it all. Like, why? Like, why though? I mean, that is the levels of control and empowerment, right? See, do you know what? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if you're talking about the whole age of consent, 16. At this point, it doesn't even matter. Right? We're talking about like crazy levels of control and alleged abuse, right? And I don't think it mattered to him. Is really what is what I mean. And of course, it matters in the grand scheme of crimes, but I don't think it mattered to him. You know. And I'm going to be honest. The most dangerous predators we've ever seen. They'll take anything they can get. Young, old, vulnerable, brainwashed, groupie. And There were some other people that were like that. Now, a scan and yes, okay. Now, she went on to say at the end of her interview that regardless of how many of these crazy, horrible, disgusting things he would do to her, she would agree to do, he would force on her, he never ever seemed happy. And he always seemed angry. Now, that was the first two victims. Tomorrow we'll look into the second two, but